Hello, everyone. I'm Sandy Rosenthal, host of Beat the Big Guys podcast, and I can't believe what I'm about to tell you. I recently finished interviewing my 50th guest. 50th, 50. Wow. 50 guests. I can't believe I've not only have I lived a dream come true to help other people beat the big guys in their communities, but I've just completed my 50th interview with my 50th amazing guests, and all of them were just equally and wonderfully amazing. I hope you, the listeners, have enjoyed each and every episode. I hope that you've been inspired by the stories that you heard. And most importantly, I hope that you've listened to and heard tools and tips and tricks and secrets galore to help you take on the big guys in your own neighborhood or community. In the first season, we devoted our time and ourselves to helping you, the listener, if you've been on the fence, if you've seen a problem in your community, but just feel scared, for lack of a better word, feel unsure that you can succeed. That season was devoted to help you get past that, to get past the worries and the unsureness, because nothing's worse than the unknown. It's the unknown that I think stopped you. And the first 10 episodes were devoted to helping you get off that fence and to get out there and beat the big guys. After that, each and every episode was devoted to stories. We heard all kinds of stories from people who have either already won, as in the case of Lois Gibbs, or are in the process of beating the big guys and are still working at it. Each story has been absolutely amazing. We've heard stories from an incredible range of guests. Just to name a few, we've heard from a chemist, journalist, a medical doctor, Native Americans, a media expert, a gang rape survivor, an artist, a biologist, an attorney, 2 city council persons, celebrities, and 2 sisters who are slave descendants. And this is just to name a few. The wide range and breadth of the guests that have been on this podcast is just absolutely incredible. And again, I still can't believe I have talked with 50 guests, 50, the big 50. The podcast was limited to 25 to 35 minutes. All the advice I had always told me that you have to keep your podcast length or your episode length to 25 to 30 minutes. And the reasons were varied, all kinds of different reasons, but that was the message that I heard over and over. But some of these episodes I felt like could have gone on for an hour or an hour and a half. And maybe that will be phase 2, a different sort of podcast that lasts for 60 to 90 minutes. So what have I learned? Well, in addition to hearing 50 amazing stories and meeting 50 wonderful people and getting close to 50 wonderful people, some I already knew and got closer, and some of them I had never met before, and now we're friends. And that's been as far as I'm concerned, that's been a sort of a nice little side effect of doing the podcast. But how is this important to you? That's what I'm most concerned about. What's important to you? After talking to 50 different people and hearing 50 stories, I discovered something that I didn't know. And it's really, really important. And it's critical that I share this with you. And this is why I'm holding this 50th, this 51st episode to share with you what I've discovered. What I've discovered is that those big guys out there, the big guys are absolutely no different than your playground bully from when you were in 3rd grade. Yeah, you heard that right. No different from the playground bully when you were in third grade. So let's talk about this for just a moment, and you'll see where I'm going. Think about the bully that you remember from third grade. What were the characteristics of that bully? Well, overwhelmingly, that bully was oversized compared to the rest of the children in the playground. So he or she was or them was bigger. And this probably was a factor related to genetics, more than likely, or they had been kept back, hadn't advanced to the next grade, so they were much older. Okay, but they were bigger, physically bigger. Okay, so that's the starters. But what else do you remember from the third grade bully? Well, the third grade bully was very thin skinned and had very low self esteem. Why else would they be bullies? And then there was one more characteristic, and this is just as important as the first two. They weren't smarter than you. If anything, they were not as smart as you. So to recap, they were physically bigger. They were had low self-esteem and were thin-skinned and easily offended. And number three, they were not smarter than you are. So how does this compare to the big guys that we are fighting today? And this big guys can take so many different forms. It could be just big business, big chemical, big oil, the entire police establishment. The list goes on and on of who these big guys are that we're trying to work with, or that we're trying to battle or to keep from ruining our neighborhoods. So how are these big guys similar to the bully on the playground? Well, number one, let's pick an example. Let's say DuPont, because I recently had an interview where we discussed DuPont, the big chemical company, which is currently just been served with lawsuit in the state of Wisconsin, DuPont. So DuPont, if you've read the book by Robert Bullock called Exposure, DuPont is so big that they consider themselves invincible and unstoppable just because they're so big. Not because they're right, but because they're so big. No matter how right anyone is, you can't stop DuPont. So that's an attitude that the big guys have. They're big and they think that that's all they need. Well, it turns out you need to be a lot more than just big in this world to succeed. So, and what's the next characteristic from the playground bully? They were thin-skinned and easily offended. Well, there's a big similarity to the big guys in our communities. They are worried about something, and it's called their self-image, their PR image, the optics. They are petrified of anything happening to harm their public image, because their public image is valued. It's invaluable. It cannot be valued in terms of dollars. It is just so priceless, for lack of a better word. And last but not least, the big guys are not smarter than you are. If anything, you are smarter than they are. Okay. And when the big guys make a mistake, and oh, they will, because they're arrogant, they think they're so big, and they're worried about their reputation, and they are not that smart often, and they make mistakes. That's what happens when you put those three characteristics together. They make mistakes, and these mistakes can be costly, and these mistakes can be big enough that it pushes them right out of your community and right out of your life, and then you can get back to the good life you had before they got there. So again, the big guys are not really that big, okay, and not that smart, and certainly very, very arrogant. So that was my major discovery that I made, that I think is really critical. I think once you start framing the big guys the way I just did, the job doesn't seem that hard anymore. Okay. Another thing I want to point out about the big guys, and this is something that I kind of knew, I suspected, but after having interviewed 50 people, I now know it, all the big guys play out of the identical playbook. They all use the same tactics, the same strategies, which is number one, first they ignore you, okay? But then when they realize they're not going away, they stall. They stall and stall. They withhold information. They won't respond to requests for data. And the other thing that they do, which is across the board, instead of discuss the issue, they change the subject and they will discuss anything and they will bring up anything except the issue that you're trying to discuss with them. And they all use the same playbook. So what's the secret? Don't let them. Don't let them. I'll give you an example. My big guys that I was battling was the Army Corps of Engineers. The way that I had to get information from, we'll call them Army Corps for short, was under the Freedom of Information Act. I filed a request. Well, I would file a request, and this is a recent one. I filed my request. I sent it in. Always be polite, of course. They responded, "Oh, we're backlogged right now." And I said, "Well, I'm, sorry to hear that. And by the way, by law, you're supposed to respond within 3 weeks. And I'll tell you what, just to be nice, I'll give you an extra week. I look forward to seeing that response to my request." And then I gave them a date. And of course, that I got my response on the date that I requested it. I just didn't let them. I didn't let them stall. And you don't have to let them either. And again, every big guy's works out of the same playbook. To quote an advisor, one of my most trusted and valued advisors, this is how he put it. When you're trying to beat the big guys, first, they ignore you. Then they laugh at you. Then they fight you. And then you win. And win you will. Win you will, especially when you've got help from folks like the Beat the Big Guys podcast. I'm going to close by thanking everybody who has ever interviewed me. I'll be honest, I didn't know until I was hosting my own podcast, Beat the Big Guys. I'll be honest, I didn't realize how much work was involved before the interview started. Now, before I have a guest, I need to research my guest. I need to know all about my guest. I needed to know the proper way to pronounce his, her, or their name. That's very embarrassing to mispronounce a name in an entire episode. And yeah, lots and lots of preparation. So now I know when you're being interviewed, all you have to do is show up. So thank you, all of those who've interviewed me in the past 17 years. Thank you, all of you, the listeners of the Beat the Big Guys podcast. We wouldn't be here if it were not for you, the listeners. And one last thing, it takes just a few seconds. Just go to your podcast platform where your favorite podcasts are, and please give Beat the Big Guys a 5-star rating. It takes just a few seconds. Thank you so much. I look forward to being with you all after I've interviewed my 51st guest. Thank you so much.